This evening I want to bring to you a lesson based off of Genesis chapter 37. And we're going to look at the story of Joseph. But before we get there, you can go and turn there if you want to. We'll be reading quite a bit from Genesis 37 through 39. Not the whole thing, but we'll read quite a few verses there. Friday afternoon, I was driving down to Warrior, Alabama, which is just north of Gardendale and Fultondale. Most of you probably know where that is. And I saw a sign on the billboard across the street. Now, it was facing me, so I don't think I was turning around as I was driving trying to read it. It was facing me right there, and it had this cute little puppy on it, and it was for an animal shelter. Now, there was an interesting thing that it said on that sign. I have no idea what animal shelters are for. It wasn't worth it for me to turn around and go back and look, and it didn't seem to make much sense. But it just had in big, bold letters, life happens. Life happens. I guess what they're saying is that, look, this poor little animal, this little puppy, this one did not look like it had been left on the side of the road, so probably all these puppies and kittens, whatever they might be, life happens. They get tossed out, they get left, they get forgotten. And then I started thinking that that's exactly how it is for us, isn't it? You could put a billboard of any one of us, and at some point in our lives, we could say, hey, life happens. So we were sitting there, and we have kind of a frowny face, and we're sulking, and we look sad and pitiful, but cute at the same time. Life happens. Life's not the only thing that happens. Death happens. We know that. Most of you know that much better than I do at this point. We have relationships that break down. Betrayal happens. Deceit and lying happens. Financial problems. Just stuff like that, we call it. It's just stuff. It happens. Sometimes it's things that we do. We happen. And it wrecks our lives. Genesis 37 is where I want to begin because I think that really gets us a good picture, to me, of what this is talking about. That we go through life, we have problems, and sometimes it's self-imposed. Sometimes it's other people that do it to us. Sometimes it just seems like it's just life that happens. And what are we supposed to do when we're thrown in a pit? We're just cast down and left for dead. Now, I'll just tell you that I'm going to use that phrase just interchangeably, and I'm going to use that figuratively. Because none of us, as far as I know, have ever been really cast down into a pit, a dried up pit that we're not able to get out of, tied and bound by our hands and feet, maybe even beaten a little bit and roughed up a little bit before thrown down. I don't think that's happened to any of us. But life does happen. And we feel like we're at the bottom of a pit sometimes. Death happens, and it causes us to feel like we're down there in the bottom of a pit. You get your test scores back, and they're not up to par. You feel like you're in the bottom of a pit. You find out that your spouse has been cheating on you. You feel like you're in the bottom of a pit. Your child comes up to you and shocks you with news that they're going to make a life-altering decision that you just cannot approve. You feel like you're at the bottom of the pit. Or you're sitting there and you're a child and your parents decide, hey, we just can't be together anymore. It brings you to the bottom of a pit. And what are you going to do? I want us to see ourselves in the story of Joseph this evening. I want to go through Genesis 37 beginning, and we're going to see some of the things that happened to Joseph. It's terrible things. Some of it we could say maybe he kind of brings a few things on himself, but it's really just life, and it's hatred from brothers. It's a disagreement between he and his brothers. It's people. It's relationships. It's just life, though. We deal with the same thing. Let's begin in Genesis 37, and let's just start in verse number 3. Verse number 3. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. So Israel's the father, loves Joseph more than any of the other sons. How would you feel if you were one of the other sons? Oh, that's fine. I don't need my father's love. Oh, that's all right. No, of course not. Jealousy kicks in. Let's continue. Because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. So not only do you know that he loves your brother more than you, he shows it. He shows him off and says, here's something that just signifies how much I love you. You're going to stand out to everybody, and everybody's going to know that you are the son that I love most. Well, now you just hate him. It's not just, oh, I'm jealous. I kind of dislike him. He's a pest. No, you hate him. So that's how they feel. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his other brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. So here we have Joseph. Is he kind of living up to being the pest that some of them look at him as? Maybe a little bit. He's just saying, and I'm sure that if you asked him, he'd say, "I was just telling you my dream. I didn't mean anything by it." Some of us that have younger brothers or younger people in our families that are like that, we know what that's like. Come on, you weren't just saying that's what happened. You were trying to prove a point. You were trying to get under my skin. And so that's how they take it, and they hate him, not just for the dream, which is going to come true. They hate him for his words. Now Joseph just shares, this is what's going to happen. You're going to bow down before me. No big deal, right? And they stop and they say, "Hold up. Say that one more time. Are you saying that you're going to rule over us? You little pipsqueak. Why don't you just wait and see what we do when mom and dad aren't around? They're going to rough him up." Well, this is the son that Israel loves. You think he's going to allow these other brothers to do anything to him? No. And they have all these tasks to do. Joseph's just sitting at home, right? So one day, and let's go on down a little bit further. Let's continue reading. So we've read down through verse number 8. Read verse 9. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars are bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. Joseph has 11 brothers. He's saying, "Look, all of you are going to bow down before me." Again, it's just how it's going to be, Dad. It's just how it's going to be, Reuben. It's just how it's going to be, Judah. No big deal, right? Well, this is a very big deal. But if you notice the reaction of the father, Israel kept it in mind. Now, he asked him a question. "Are you really saying this, Joseph? Are you really saying that even I and your mother and all your brothers are going to bow down before you?" But he kept it in mind because he thought this might be true. This might actually come to pass. But his brothers, they don't think that way. They just think, "Oh, man, I hate this kid. I cannot stand him." And they're jealous of him. Do you know why the Jews persecuted and crucified Jesus, why they sought to kill him? The New Testament tells us it's out of envy that they did so. Envy and jealousy can cause us to do some pretty horrendous things. And as we're going to see, it causes them to treat their brother, maybe they don't like him, maybe he doesn't fit in, but still, it's going to cause them to treat him as if he were an enemy, as if he were the most hated individual they could ever think of, when he has done nothing except just be Joseph and be who he's supposed to be. Be the person that God is promising and God is revealing that he's going to be. Now, one lesson might be that we think, well, just you shouldn't open your mouth. I don't know if there's a problem with what he said. I don't know how he said it. I can imagine that he said it in a way that would get under my skin. But that doesn't mean you try to do him harm. That doesn't mean you hate him. Now let's skip on down to verse number 19. Verse number 19. So his father sends him, go find your brothers. And they see him, verse 19 says, coming from afar off. And they say, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him in one of the pits." Whoa. That's a little bit of a step. That's a little bit of a leap, if you ask me. Hey, there he is. Let's kill him. Maybe you'd be the same way. I don't know how I'd be. I'd like to think I'm one of the ones that would say, "Hold on, guys. Let's not kill him. Let's think of something else." But I might be right there with him, and you might be too. Hey, let's just get rid of this kid. We can't stand him. This helps us out. We don't have to listen to him. Maybe our father loves us more, or one of us at least, picks us out. Now we're his favorite. So they conspire against him. And they say, verse 20, "Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." Okay, so you think these dreams are going to come true? Dad, you're going to remember this dream that he has, and you think it's going to happen? Wait till we do what we have planned. Wait till we just make up some great story that he's been killed and mauled, and that, oh, here's his robe. Here's his robe of many colors. He's dead. No one's going to bow before him. That's their plan. Reuben, verse 21, it says he heard it and he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father." Reuben has a really good plan, it seems. Okay, don't kill him, throw him in the pit, because then what he's thinking is, I'll come back and I'll help him later. But still, throw him in the pit. You think if they were going to listen to Reuben, maybe he could have just said, don't do any harm to him at all. But I guess Reuben sees that his brothers are angry. You have to give him a little bit, right? It's a give and take. So, all right, we'll throw him in the pit. Just don't kill him, don't shed blood, and I'll just come back and rescue him. That's his grand plan. And then it just doesn't happen that way. So we go to verse 23. Joseph came to his brothers. They stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. This pit is the lowest of the low. The pit was the place that was going to equal, maybe not the death, but definitely the demise in some way. Maybe it would be something that was meant to humble Joseph, right? Because he thinks he's so great. Well, let's go over and let's recap just a little bit of some of these things that have happened. So Joseph's brothers hate him for their father's love, the dreams, and what Joseph has said. They see him coming and plot against him. I want you to notice that the pit was always part of the plan. It was always part of the plan. Whether they were going to kill him or not, they were always going to utilize the pit and throw him in there. Throw him in there so that he would be humbled. Throw him in there, leave him for dead. Throw him in there to teach him a lesson. The pit is always a plan for us as well. No matter what form it takes, no matter what we find when we're down there, it's always going to be part of the plan where we're cast down and we get to the bottom and then there's nothing. Whether it's self-imposed, whether it's because people hate us, or all we can come up with is it's Satan that does it. The pit is always part of the plan at some point in our life. Now let's continue and let's go over to chapter 39 and read a few verses. Chapter 39, and let's read we're going to begin in verse 1. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, so he's sold into slavery, is what happens. And he's brought to Egypt eventually. And Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. You know how much they sold Joseph for? 20 pieces of silver. Remember the lesson that Kenny did where Judas betrayed Jesus for how much? 30 pieces of silver. The price for what would be a slave, and really one that's not worth very much, right? How much is Joseph worth to them? Not very much. Really nothing. 20 pieces of silver. The Lord was with Joseph, though, verse 2 says of chapter 39. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended to him. And he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was all that he had in his house and his field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is no greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her or to be with her. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, none of the men of the house was in the house. She called him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. So now, it's a pretty intense story. So he comes into be a great successful man in the house of Potiphar, who is a very high-ranking official in Pharaoh's, inner circle maybe even. So he has a lot going on for him. And success has been happening all over, all in this Egyptian's house, all because the Lord is with Joseph. But then here comes another pit, if you will. Because Potiphar's wife wants to sin with Joseph. And she begs of him. She pleads with him. And then what we see, as most of us know, what happens at the end of the story is that she commits a lie against him and gets this grand scheme because, hey, she's sitting there with his robe, and now what's she going to do? Well, she's mad at him. So she's going to go and she's going to tell her husband, tell Potiphar, this is what Joseph did. This is the evil that he did. So he's going to get cast into prison. Again, another pit. Now, was this self-imposed? What did Joseph do wrong to wind up in this pit? Nothing. He did everything right. Because he committed himself that he was not going to sin against Potiphar, and he was not going to sin against his God. 2 years pass. 2 years pass. And the cupbearer, who at one point had forgotten about him, finally remembers, hey, there was this guy down in the prison who could tell dreams, and he knew exactly what was going to happen, and he actually said that I was going to be released and that the other guy was going to be killed, and that's exactly what happened. And then Pharaoh listens, brings him out of prison, and now Joseph is able to rise to prominence once again. And we read that in chapter 41 is where all that takes place. So just to recap a little bit more of what we've read, things turn out well for a while. He's tempted by his master's wife, and after refusing, after he did what was right, he's sent to prison. Back in a pit. Back there alone. Now, I know there were some people around, for a while at least, because actually one of the things it says in one of the chapters, I believe it's chapter 40 maybe, is that the person who's a guard, who's in charge of the prison, he realizes that the Lord is with Joseph. He realizes there's something special with him. So he's kind of in charge of the prison almost. He's down there, and he's able to interpret dreams for a couple of these guys. He's able to make sure everything is running as it should be. But he's still in prison. He's still not in that position that he thought he was going to be when he once interpreted those dreams to his brother, saying that I'm going to be the one that you all bow down to. Look at him. He's a pitiful man in a prison, in a place that he knows nobody. He's not at home. He's estranged from all people. He's back in a pit. But he's rescued from the prison and is second in command behind Pharaoh, it says. If you go to chapter 41, you go on down to verse number 38. I think these are pretty important verses here. So Joseph rises to power. Verse 37 says, this proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants. Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne will I be greater than you. It's pretty powerful stuff. I mean, he's really climbed up the ranks quick, all because of what? Because his ability to see dreams and interpret dreams? That's part of it. The bigger thing is that God is with him. People see it. People can tell that the Lord's with him. Pharaoh even sees it. And he wants good to happen to him. He wants to make sure he keeps this guy close by. So he says, you're going to be second in command. No one is going to be more powerful than you except for me in all of Egypt, in all the land. And then, as we probably know, the famine happens that Joseph interpreted as part of the Pharaoh's dream. The famine happens, and so what does that mean? Well, it's in all the world, right? Joseph's brothers are sent down to Egypt to get grain, to get some things so they can survive back with their father. And they come, and they don't recognize Joseph. He recognizes them, though. And we can see that starting in chapter 42. And there's this long exchange of he sends them back. He kind of deals a little harshly with them. And then he just wants to see his brother, right? He wants to see his little brother. And finally, they actually bring him, and he eventually reveals himself to his brothers. And if you look over in chapter 45, verse 1 says, then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. He cried, make everyone go out from me. So no one stayed with him when Joseph had made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud. Why did he weep? He should have just wept out of anger, right? This is a man that's been through so much. From a time where some people say he was 17 when he was cast in that pit. Let's just say he was in a 20-year-old maybe. I mean, can you handle that at 20, at 30, 40, being just estranged and cast out of your own home, put in a pit, left to die, sold into slavery, gone to a land, done wrong by people time and time again, and finally here comes your family, the people who you love, the people who you're familiar with. He can't control himself. He weeps aloud, so that the Egyptians heard it and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? It's not, I am Joseph, and you better get ready for what's coming. I am Joseph, and now you're going to bow before me. No, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? Is dad still around? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, Come near to me, please. And they came near, and he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. Look at the attitude and the perspective of Joseph here. It's okay, guys. I know you meant ill. I know you meant evil towards me. But God had a plan, and it was all to preserve life for us. There was good that God was doing in all of this. Joseph is an example of several qualities that I see. First is forgiveness, being forgiving in a way that I cannot imagine. Being done wrong like this, and you're still forgiving. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's your best bud. If someone does this to you, are you going to be able to forgive them? Well, we had the attitude, well, I'll forgive, but I won't forget. Joseph puts it out of his head. And now it's still there, but you go on after it towards the end of his life, and we'll read this in just a little bit. And at the end of, towards the end of his life, after his father dies, now his brothers are scared again. Well, now dad's dead, and he's really going to enact vengeance on us, right? And Joseph can tell what's going on, and he just tells them, don't worry. No harm is going to come to you. It's going to be okay because I know that God had a plan. I know this was, you meant evil, but he forgives them clearly. He's also very patient. How patient would you be sitting down there in the prison after the cupbearer had forgotten about you for 2 years? 2 years the dream had come true, and he knows that, hey, that was Joseph that said this was going to happen. And he does nothing. He's just sitting there. You see a man of conviction here. Would you be as convicted as he is to run away, to run and flee from someone or something that is just saying, here I am, this is easy, right? No one will find out. That's what he does. Why? Because he says, I don't want to commit this great sin against my God. Humility. I see so much humility, and maybe not at the beginning of the story. Maybe he's not as humble as he should be as he tells his brothers, hey, you're going to bow down before me. But you see at the end, he's a very humble man. He's appreciative for all that he has, even though at one time he had nothing. And I think that all these qualities can be summed up in one thing that Joseph had. That's love. You just look at 1 Corinthians 13, you tell me if you see these other 4 qualities. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. But boy, that's a pretty deep pit. To have that much love, to where it really does endure, and it really does have this patience and forgiveness, where it's not resentful. There's only one place we get that love from. That's from God. Everybody could see that God was with Joseph. He had this within him the whole time. So my question for us is, can we say that we have that love? I can read about that love. I can see that love. But do I have that love? I'll tell you that if you don't, when it comes time for you to where you're in that pit, you won't make it out. And if you do make it out, you're not going to be who you ought to be at the end. Because you're going to be resentful. Because if it's the people that have done you wrong, you're going to do them wrong, maybe times 10, right? if it's situations that just went awry, you're going to be so defensive and fearful that you're just going to act like, okay, I can't do anything. You might even turn and blame God. Why? Because we don't have love. Love is something we need no matter what position we're in. No matter if we're the one that feels like we're at the bottom of the pit or we're the one that's climbing out of the pit. Those are the qualities that we need to see in Joseph, that we need to try to exemplify in ourselves as well. As I said, we were going to read, this is towards the end of the book. This is the last chapter. Joseph and his brother's father has passed away. And they're, like I said, they're very concerned. And he just says, look, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive. Again, what perspective, what humility, what wisdom we see in Joseph here, who from a young man really did not have the opportunity to be raised for that long, at least to be raised in a house that would be a godly house, right? He's in Egypt for the majority of his life at this point. But he still knows, he still remembers who God is and that God had a plan throughout all of this. Well, there's a few more points that I want to make, a few more application points, and then we'll draw the lesson to a close. Here's 3 realizations from the story about being thrown into a pit. You can't climb out. If you dig yourself a hole, which we all do at times, don't think that you're strong enough where you can climb out. We can do this in many ways. We do this by living our lives carefree, worry-free, law-free, everything. We just think that we're just going to do what we want to do. You're digging yourself into a pit. This can happen because of mistakes we make, and we're not taking into account any repercussions of our actions. Let's say it's sin that is our pit. We got ourselves there, and now we think that we have the power to scratch and claw our way out. You don't. What can you talk about this morning? Mercy. Mercy is what you need, not some sort of willpower that I can fight this, I can do this. You've been addicted to something. You've been having some sort of habitual sins for years and years, and you think you have the power to get out of that, to stop it. You don't by yourself. God has that power. God will be the one to strengthen you. We need mercy. We need forgiveness. We need the strength of God. We need dedication and conviction just like Joseph. But just consider that, what if he didn't think about God in that situation? As much conviction as he had, he still would have given in to her. Day after day she came and tempted him. Only through God was he able to say, no, I will not. Maybe it's financial mistakes or any other kind of bad decision we have made. So we try to cover it up and not let anyone find out because we're so embarrassed. And here's the truth. We cannot climb out of that pit by ourselves. And we feel like, well, I got myself here, I'll get myself out. You keep trying. You're going to be wasting your time, wasting your energy. Lean on God. That's the only way you're going to get out of that pit. You will not do it by yourself. If you were thrown in, if people did it to you, you were hated by other people, don't blame others. Don't blame others. Not only is that just not smart, but that's not what's going to be best for you in the long run. Your parents were divorced when you were a kid. So as you grow up, you find it hard to trust. You find it hard to love. You have all these problems. Don't blame your parents. Now, were they at fault for some things? Well, of course. But it does no good to blame them. You wind up bitter, not willing to listen to anyone. You can't seem to trust anybody. So what are you going to do? Don't blame others. The doctors misdiagnosed something that had been there. And now it's too late. Is it their fault? Well, sure. They messed up. They missed it. That will do absolutely no good for you while you're stuck in that pit of sadness, though. You want to blame them. You want to blame others. You're not going to stop there. You'll wind up blaming God. When we turn and blame others, we delay and get further away from the response God wants us to have, forgiveness and love. That's what we see in Joseph. And lastly, we need to keep looking up. What if Joseph had just buried his head while he was in that pit, while he was in prison? What if he decided that I just don't even want, I don't care anymore. It's been too long. Well, you don't get out that way. I feel like sometimes we dig ourselves into a pit and we get in a hole, or maybe some things happen, and then we see a light at the end of the tunnel, but we've seen it for so long and we can't seem to get there that all of a sudden we turn away and we don't want that light anymore. I'd rather not even have that hope because it's just getting my hopes up. I need to keep looking up. At some point, we might start doubting. We might start thinking that it'd be better if there was no glimmer of hope. Don't doubt. Be patient. Another quality we see in Joseph. And now, just 3 confessions when in a pit, 3 admissions or responses that we need to have. I can't, but Christ can. Philippians 4:13 says, I know, or verse 12 says, I know how to be brought low and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. Here's the secret, right? Paul is about to reveal this, whether it's financial problems, whether it's you don't have all that you feel like you need, whether it's problems in your home, whether it's you can't get out of sin, whatever it is, here's what you need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's not what I hope to hear. I hoped you would give me A, B, C, right? Step 1, 2, 3 to get out. No, you need the strength of Christ because you can't, but Christ can get you out of that. I doubt, but God knows. 2 Timothy 2:11 says this saying is trustworthy, for if we have died with him, we also will live with him. If we endure, we will also reign with him. If we deny him, he will deny us. If we are faithless, he remains faithful. And 2 Corinthians 5:1 says, for we know that if the tent that is our earthly home is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Endurance is something that we need when we're down there, when we feel in the dumps, when everything seems to go wrong, when we lose that loved one that was our rock. We just doubt. But God knows. And he is providing for us a place, eternal in the heavens. This tent that is our body is passing away. We need endurance. We need to trust in God. We need to remain faithful because he's remaining faithful to us. And lastly, we need to understand and admit and be comfortable with this. I'm never alone with God. I'm never alone with God. When you're down there, you feel like you're the only one. You have to cover everything else up because no one can know how bad you've messed up. Acts 17:27 says, yet he is actually not far from each one of us. Just keep that in mind. And then as David was in his pit that he dug for himself after his sin with Bathsheba, he says in chapter 51 of Psalm, verse 11, cast me not away from your presence. Take not your Holy Spirit from me. Don't push God away and realize that he's there. And you're not alone. You can rely on him. You can talk to him. He will be your rock. He will be the catalyst for you getting out of that depression, of that addiction, of that anxiety, of whatever it might be. But you got to turn to him. Don't be too proud. Be humble, just like Joseph. And two verses just to conclude, just to remind ourselves of as we wrap up this evening. Genesis 50, verses 19 through 21. Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive, so they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. As he has come out of the other side and he's standing upright out of the pit, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen again. He is finally able to say, here I am. And instead of doing what we probably would have done, he just turns to them and says, it's okay. It's all right. God meant it for good. He meant for this to bring about good, not just for me, but for all people. So people could be kept alive. What would have happened when that famine hit if Joseph had not been in the position he was in? It's done. They're dead. They're starving. God can use us. Not that he necessarily tosses us into the pit, but if we will respond the way God wants us to, he can use us to keep other people alive, to turn other people to him. And just a question that I find very insightful from Pharaoh in Genesis 41:38. Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? So my question for you this evening is that said of you? Can that be said of you that no matter what life throws at you, because life happens, right? Can it be said that where can we find someone that has this faith, has this endurance and patience, this love? If it is not said of us because maybe we're too proud, maybe we really just don't care, we've decided that we're just going to give up, maybe we'd start blaming others, and if that's what it said of us, then we need to turn. We need to repent. We need to turn to God and ask for Him to help us when we're down there, when we're downtrodden and beat up. I find myself feeling sometimes I'm in a pit, and then I look around and I see other people and I think, well, this was just not a pit at all, was it? This was just like a little hole in the yard that I just stepped in. But it doesn't mean that when I'm down there that I don't feel like it's a big deal, that I don't feel like maybe it's not worth it, that I don't doubt. And maybe you're the same way. Maybe you sometimes look around and say, I've gone through nothing. Don't think that way. Life happens all the time to each and every one of us. But it's about how we respond once it gets us down. It's about us not just getting up by ourselves, it's about us looking to God, looking above, and relying on Him to get us up. And so we can then be brought out of that pit. Not climb out ourselves, be brought out of it. If you're here this evening and you need to respond to the gospel, you've looked at your life and you've seen, my life is not what it needs to be. I have been beat up, beat down, and the only thing I know to do is to turn to God. We're here to help you. There's a song we're about to sing, Zion's Call. Do you hear it? It's ringing. It's ringing for all of us. And if you need to respond, you have a spiritual need. Once you answer that call this evening as we stand and as we sing.